Welcome back to Touchline Talk by Soccerspective. I'm your host, Brandon Faust, and joined today by the founder of Soccerspective, Ashwin Jadhav, who is joining me. Where in the world are you joining from today?
I'm in Vancouver, Canada.
Vancouver, Canada, and I'm here in Indianapolis here in the United States. And today we're looking at summer transfers and their tactical fit within their new team and the ripple effects that we're already seeing across Europe as the preseason is in full force. And as the new season gets ready to kick off here very, very shortly. And one of the biggest transfers that happened here earlier in the summer is Florian Wirtz from Bayer Leverkusen to Liverpool. You know, part of that, he was a key part of that Xavi Alonso team 2 seasons ago that was, basically unbeaten, right? In every competition. Unbelievable. Give me your initial thoughts on Florian Wirtz. Kind of what is he as a player? I know he just turned 22, plays for Germany, and now, this big time signing, one of the record signings now for Liverpool, just one of these game-shifting transfers. So what are your initial thoughts, Ashwin, on this signing and who Florian Wirtz is as a player?
Yeah, it sounds very, very exciting, right? For Liverpool, for the Premier League. He's a young and exciting player that has just got a lot of really good skills and fills a lot of the gaps that Liverpool need to fill at this point, right? They've lost a little bit of the firepower that they had, and Florian Wirtz gives them really a lot of flexibility in many cases, right? I can even see him really interchanging spots with Gakpo and Salah on a really match to match basis, right? And that's what I think Arne Slot really wants to promote a lot more of, is that fluidity that he wants with the front three, and these three folks really just give him that, right? So I think Wirtz is gonna fit in really well. Now the only question is, right, how much depth do they need in that exact spot as well, right? Because they've lost Núñez, they've lost Luis Díaz as well, and they had depth in those positions, right? I know we're hearing rumblings of Isak moving from Newcastle as well, right? Which they might end up needing over the long term, because they'll have to compete in so many different competitions, right? So I think that depth that they had last year, I don't see them having it as of now. But I think in general, just the signing itself is so exciting, and can't wait to see how he fits into the Liverpool squad.
Yeah, and obviously the level, the Bundesliga is a very good league, but it's not the same, intensity match after match as the Premier League, right? And then the pressure when you're a big money signing, he's still freshly 22 years old. There's a lot of pressure to perform, right? And I think there is some interesting things I think you bring up tactically, Gravenberch, Szoboszlai. Szoboszlai would sometimes push into that number 10 role, but we saw Alexis Mac Allister there a lot, right? So what happens to him in this whole picture? And I think even as much as Slot likes that movement across those front four players, if you will. He also likes that, in kind of a double pivot that he'll play. He likes, even watching the preseason, Wirtz is dropping into the hole to pick up play to create, right? And then Gravenberch and Szoboszlai can get forward as well. So it'll be interesting how Alexis Mac Allister, who was, 35 appearances last season, 5 goals, 5 assists, 88% pass complete, like a very crucial player for them. What does this all look like? Obviously, everybody wants to be on the pitch. Everyone wants to play. Injuries you expect, lots of competitions, but it'll be interesting if Wirtz gets kind of the keys to the creative engine. How much is he going to want the ball, demand the ball? Salah needs the ball at his feet quite a bit, as well. In these early preseason matches against like Yokohama, against Athletic Club, watching, they like to play into like a 3-2-5 in possession, right? So Gravenberch or Szoboszlai will drop into the back three. And then even these wing backs are kind of tucking in tactically as part of the buildup. And then the wingers, Gakpo, Salah, are going very wide. So it's going to be interesting to see, they're coming off the heels of a Premier League title, to see what's going to happen with this. Obviously, the sad news out of Liverpool earlier this summer came with the tragic death of Diogo Jota. Absolutely horrific tragedy, as he and his brother both lost their lives in that accident. Such a great loss for his family. He had just gotten married. Such a big loss for the club, all of his teammates, his friends, and the global soccer community. His game always brought a lot of joy. His off-ball movement, his incredible runs, his knack for cutting into the box, his chemistry, and scored some massive goals for them over the last few years. Was a key fixture in their team, and so there's even that in the soccer element of that, of not having that kind of wing play, as well as, like as we mentioned, Luis Díaz being sold to Bayern Munich, who brought a lot of width, directness, 1v1 outlet. And so it's kind of like setting up for like a little bit narrower team when you get into that attacking spots. And if it means Wirtz and whomever else lines up in the midfield have a lot of responsibility to break the lines, from those central tight areas. I don't know if you've seen this kid, Rio Nuhama, 16-year-old wonder talent. He scored in the first 2 minutes against Athletic Club in they played them like kind of back-to-back days, and then had an assist as well. This kid is insane. Like absolutely, like you hate to say it, kind of like Lamine Yamal vibes, really. Like truly exceptional player. And obviously he's ahead of schedule of where they thought he might be, I think even physically. And so there's even chatter around him. Now, you don't want him to be a 16-year-old kid, the first one up off the bench as part of their development and the pressure. Liverpool are wanting titles, but, it will be interesting to see, Isak, if he comes in. I mean, he's a more direct number 9 type player, can be a little bit creative as well, because, they brought in and spent a lot of money on this Ekitike, right? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Trent Alexander-Arnold's gone. Darwin Núñez is gone. It's going to be interesting, Arne Slot 2.0. What do you think? Where do you think this Liverpool team ends up? At the end of this season, I know it's early. The transfer window's still open, but do you think they have a shot to go back to back, or do you think that this is kind of a reset? Not a full reset of the deck, but it's definitely a big shot. I mean, very rarely do you see a Premier League team win the title and then 5-6 players that were core to that no longer part of it. So, yeah, what are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, look, the answer is definitely that they're going to be a force to reckon with, and they're building the squad up, right? I think the key here is going to be Arne Slot is going to feel the pressure this year, right? I think so. Last year, he just inherited this really great group, and he was very smart to not change much, right? Because it was so adaptive already to his style and the way he wants the team to play. But this year, there's been a lot of turnaround in general. So you have players leaving, you have new players coming in, and so that's where the real test is: how quickly can you get these players to integrate into your system? And as you mentioned, Brandon, now they're starting to look a little more narrow. So I'm wondering, how much does Arne Slot really need to tweak that system and get the players to do things slightly differently, and how much pressure does that create on their attacking creativity and other things like that, right? So I think the other piece here to really think about is last year not all the other teams really performed to their full potential, right? I don't think Liverpool really got a good title challenge, right? Like, a couple of years ago we saw Man City and Arsenal really go at it completely. And so I feel like this year they'll get a much stiffer challenge from let's see who, right? There's a bunch of teams out there really building up in the right way, and hopefully, the pressure that those teams are facing this year will materialize into some real top level title contention, right? You can see Arsenal really focusing on this season as this being their season, right? They have to really get some silverware out there to this year, otherwise, you have to question what's next for them, right? Same thing with Man City. They were way off the pace last year, so I'm thinking that at least Arsenal or Man City have to be right up there challenging Liverpool. But Liverpool have the right potential again, right? They're really looking to fill the gaps in the right way. And yeah, I think looking at Rio Goma, he was phenomenal, right? He's again, we don't want to. You and I are both coaches, Brandon, so we know how important it is to really let the youth take their time and develop in the right way. So I wouldn't also be surprised if he went out on loan for a season. Either that or Arne Slot would have to give him a few opportunities here and there with the first team, which will be exciting as well, right? There's also another youngster that impressed me. His name is Ben Doak, right? And he's developing the right way as well. So I feel like Arne Slot not only is focusing on that first team, but he's also looking at the academy. He's really building things the way he did at Feyenoord, and that mentality, that culture that has to be developed in a club like Liverpool is being developed, right? And I don't think they could have ever thought that any replacement to Jurgen Klopp was going to have so much success and so much alignment with the way Jurgen Klopp did things, right? So this has been the last season for them was probably the best outcome that they could have expected, right? Obviously, winning the Premier League and a few other things. So yeah, I think looking forward to the next season, but there's there's going to be some pressure on Slot, and I think he needs to really come out of that with all of the responses that Liverpool need to have in terms of attacking, defense, with depth, etc. And not to mention they have a lot of games to play in this coming season, right? So they're gonna have four of the usual competitions, and then who knows, like something after that as well. So just the number of games that teams are playing now are so much more. The intensity is at the highest, so they're really going to have to maybe bring in a couple of other players, I feel, to get to where they need to be.
Yeah, and I think that's what some Liverpool fans that I've spoken with, they're like, do we like they can't believe they're saying this, but they're like, do we really need Isak? If we're going to break the bank for him, why not get two or three other rotational pieces that can, great players, right? But maybe not, break the bank. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. In a alternate universe, before Leeds United hired Jesse Marsh, do you know who they were after? Is Arne Slot. And now, obviously, he wouldn't have had all the tools and toys to play with and that setup at the time. But man, it just makes you wonder. It makes me wonder as a fan, just seeing his ability. I think there was a lot of questions, even though there was alignment with play style with Klopp. But like, could he manage those big personalities? Could he manage, a pretty vulnerable situation? There were a lot of rumblings that Mo Salah was not going to be at Liverpool. Virgil van Dijk, that they might let hit, they might try and, get rid of him and change the guard. And I think Slot kind of kept that core together. And then the year two is now building, and bringing his personnel and all that stuff. So it'll be fascinating to watch. In other news, and we interrupt this episode to bring you our sponsor, Equipt Studios. Equipt Studios are making fantastic kits for teams, for soccer teams all over. If you are involved with a club, if you are involved with a professional soccer team, this right here, USL League 2, the third tier here in the United States, the West Junction Seattle FC kit is awesome. I love this. And our friends at Equipt Studio are making these. They've actually even made training jerseys for some of the soccer trainings I do. They're amazing. They're high quality. Check them out at equipstudios.com. Austin and the team are doing incredible work there. So check out Equipt Studios. Get yourself a really custom, really thought through in terms of brand design, the little intricacies. I mean, I love what's going on with this badge here. some of the markings. Obviously, you can get your badge on there. Lightweight, meant for athletes to be in. You can include your sponsors. I mean, even little things right here on the collar as well. So Equipt Studios, that's equiptstudios.com. In other news, in the Serie A last year, Napoli, I mean, just an absolute dream season for Scott McTominay, which, at Man United, he would have his moments, right? But was often a deep lying type player and was, in and out of the lineup. And just watching him win Serie A Player of the Year, as this kind of making marauding runs, crashing the box, direct, vertical. I mean, he was unbelievable last season. But there is now a change, happening. Again, it's a big name signing, somebody who's won a lot, and been, one of, if not the best, midfielder in the history of the Premier League, and Kevin De Bruyne, now lands at Napoli. How does KDB fit into this? How do they, because McTominay would play as kind of an 8, but scoot into that number 10 role. They would even kind of have him in and around the box like a number 9 because of his size. So what does that transition look like? Obviously, the Serie A is a different kind of league. You could argue the technicality of that league and maybe a little less physicality, which I think could be great, for a player like KDB to continue his run and use his skills and all those things. How do you see this kind of working out? And what do you see this kind of, can Napoli repeat some of the success of this past season?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Kevin De Bruyne really does there, right? He's obviously the talent is there. We know that, everybody knows that. The question is, how does he fit in, right? And what has do there have to be tactical tweaks done to the system itself to allow Kevin De Bruyne the freedom that he needs to operate, right? Because like you said, Kevin De Bruyne has had stints as a number 8, right? He's done box to box, but his true strength is that creativity, which you can kind of have come out of the number 8 role as well. But I'm not sure he has the legs to be the number 8 anymore, right? So you want to really tweak your system as much as possible to give him the opportunity to be the number 10 as much as possible, and then use him as a number 8 only when when the stamina or the game conditions allow it, right? So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how they do. Again, with Napoli, they're going to have many games. They're going to be right up there again, challenging for the Serie A. Other teams are gonna really ramp up their efforts. I feel, again, with Napoli, they got some good competition, but I also didn't feel like a lot of the other teams were at full throttle, right? And they were really at full potential even, right? So it'll be interesting to see how the Milans and the Juves and some of the other teams really do um, this year. And you can see some good signings that have been made by other teams, right? So the question I have for you, Brandon, is: do you see a world where Kevin De Bruyne and McTominay can play together in the same system and be as effective as they need to be?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how they tactically want to line up. Can they, obviously, there's a polarizing manager in the mix of this too that has his kind of set ways. And so, I mean, even you're seeing some of these teams that will play kind of the Christmas tree formation, right? And you have almost like 2 number 10s. I could see that being something interesting where, McTominay can do a bit more running, right? Get more vertical in the box and kind of play off almost like as a, like a second striker, and let, Kevin De Bruyne do what he does and play, through balls like crazy, right? But they also have the arrival of players like Noah Lang. Noah Lang's an extraordinarily talented winger. I think at times has had some of his pretty significant off-field things going on. But if they can start to mesh, I think there's some real possibility there. But I think they can work together. I just think, the difficult thing is, I mean, they wanted to build statues for McTominay after this past season, and anybody else truly that would come into this team, it's like, no, there's second fiddle behind McTominay. This is our guy, right? But then you bring in someone of the ilk of Kevin De Bruyne, which garners respect, and if it's not working early, I think this could become kind of a toxic sort of thing where they're going to feel obviously big name signing, a free transfer, but he's going to be on big wages. Where there's going to be, you can only have so many people on the ball creating, finishing, all of those kinds of things. So I think it has the potential to work. I could also see this thing uh, again, similar to your point about the Premier League. I think a lot of Serie A teams underperformed last year, right? So it'll be interesting to see how they pick up. Napoli clearly overperformed, and rightfully won it, on the with a point, at the end of the season. So I think if they can find a way, I would love to see them both kind of sitting in those number 10 type roles. I think that'd be really fun because McTominay is not a typical 10. Let him do a little bit more running. Let Kevin De Bruyne cook a bit. And you've got people, you've got a lot of size like Lukaku and McTominay who can get into the air, play a ball back, drop it back for De Bruyne sitting at the top of the 18 and finish. So it's going to be a fun one to watch. But I also could see that slight scenario where if De Bruyne isn't, is demanding a lot of the ball, I think he's unfairly been labeled at times as like a difficult. I think he's just a demanding, excellent player. But if it's not coming off for him, if he's losing his legs completely, we'll probably find out in the first third of the season. So it'll be a fun one to watch
Yeah, I
for
will.
sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think just it's strange that you see uh, Scott McTominay in this sort of a position. Just about, what was it, 340 days ago he was at Man United, right? And he's gelled so quickly with that system, and he's just, I think that system has just unlocked and unleashed him completely, right? I remember seeing videos of the Mourinho times at Man United, and there's this very distinct clip where Alex Ferguson is waiting in the stands and shakes Mourinho's hands and goes, McTominay, you got to play McTominay more, right? And it's this viral clip on YouTube now. But Ferguson has built him, right? And he's really built a machine. I think it's he has so much of Roy Keane and Paul Scholes in him, right? You can kind of see that from the get go, and he has a lot more, I would say, right? If you've ever seen Scott McTominay go wide, he can even cross the ball with good accuracy and stuff. So like he's become the perfect midfielder. He's become the perfect team player, I would say, right? And that's what's gotten him so much accolade, and now he's up for the Ballon d'Or, and there's just, he deserves every single piece of the praise he's getting, and I think he's going to want to prove to everybody out there that this is not just a one-off season, right? That he's a consistent player, and that he can perform at the highest level, right? And so I'm not sure how he's looking at the arrival of KDB, but hopefully it is more complementary than replacement oriented. But
Yeah.
this season is going to be fun.
Yeah, I think it's an important reminder too, even especially when you're working with youth, but even at that professional level, sometimes it's just moving into a little bit different position, right? Which Scott McTominay did at Napoli, a different system that can really unlock and accentuate somebody's, strengths. And I think it's you don't see it quite as much at the professional level when someone's kind of mid later 20s, but it does still happen, right? A lot of times you'll see people in the twilight of their career maybe have to go a little bit more central or a little further back on the pitch, but it is fascinating to see still that development and what can unlock in the right system with the right coaching, right positions, all of those things. Speaking of tactics, there's some emerging trends that we're seeing throughout European soccer. Now, there's always There's always some tinkering that's going on in styles and systems. And, you can make the arguments that there are some managers who are so wedded to their system that they'll never, change, right? Even if they don't have the players for it, they're going to play their way. And then you have managers over the years, like an Ancelotti, others who will see what they have as players and then mold a system around them. But one of the trends that we've been seeing, and we mentioned it even with this new Liverpool look for 25-26, are fullbacks essential playmakers. We're seeing more of this inverted fullbacks, a number 6 or a defensive mid dropping into the back line to form a back 3 and then build out from there. I think even those we've seen it, with Guardiola when Rico Lewis, kind of emerged into that role. João Cancelo before he left would fit into that role where he'd kind of tuck in almost like in those spots as like a number 6 or a number 8 as part of the buildup. We even saw Trent Alexander-Arnold do that a bit at Liverpool. What do you make of this, trend that we're starting to see where it's adding a different layer, if you will? It's not quite into the center part of the midfield. It's not quite into where that number 10 occupies or the wingers. It's tucked in a bit. What do you see as these fullbacks as central playmakers in this trend? And maybe, what's a team that we might see do this more and more as the season goes on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, as coaches, right? Again, when we're coaching the youth, the one of the primary things that you want to really establish with the young players, and I'm talking 7 to 10 years even, right? You're basically telling them, look, the core of the team. Now that you have some skills, the core of the team is in the middle, right? You make sure that centrally you're solid, and you won't concede, right? Let the opponent go wide, and then that becomes sort of the mentality, right? Now if you take that theory and you apply it to professional soccer, that's what's really happening here, is because you want to have your front 5 or front 6, you want to give them a lot more flexibility and a lot more freedom, right? And you kind of saw Liverpool do this just phenomenally, right? Where both of their deep lying midfielders used to push up to give the front 3 and extra layer of support. And the reason folks like Szoboszlai could make those deep runs and get fed from Salah, and you can see so many goals they've scored. Just Salah passing to a running Szoboszlai cutting it back into the middle and just to tap in, right? Szoboszlai can make those runs because he knows that Mac Allister is right behind him and is providing the right amount of support. And Mac Allister and Gravenberch have scored really long range goals, right? Because they've pushed up. The reason they can push up is because they know that folks like Alexander Arnold are going to tuck inside, right? That is the primary reason. And they can let the opponent go wide, and Alexander Arnold will kind of push back, go wide, and then put the pressure while the central midfielders then retreat, right? And so this system has worked out really well for a lot of folks, because you end up delaying the opponent's attack, you end up not conceding as much, and you have the right level of creativity and support in attack, right? And I think one team, to answer your other question, one team that we're gonna see do this a lot more in a different way, perhaps, is going to be Man United, where now they're building like a 3-4-3 kind of setup, where that back 3 will pretty much stay central the whole time. They'll push up slightly, but then their wing backs will just focus on the flanks, right? And then they'll have 2 central midfielders together with the back 3 focusing on the middle, and the 2 central midfielders can push up further because they have a back 3 that's going to tuck in at the right time, that's going to put the central pressure, right? We saw Man City do this a few years ago really, really well as well, right? When I think in the early days when Guardiola came in, this was one of the first things he started to implement. To your point, where Cancelo really was, going inward. We saw Kyle Walker do this so many times as well, and he's excelled at that role. So you kind of need the right profile of player, and that becomes the biggest challenge, right? Because now you're looking for a fullback that can really play as a center back sometimes, that can play as a number six sometimes, and that can really push up on the flanks and cross a ball in when needed as well, right? And make those overlapping runs, make underlapping runs, like all of that. You need a complete right back and left back, right? And so this kind of profile didn't exist maybe 10-20 years ago, right? And now you're starting to see the emphasis that is being placed on developing players to play in those sort of positions, because gone are the days when you're like, oh, I'm a fullback, all I need to do is run up and down the pitch and cross the ball, right? And focus on the opponent not getting into a central position from my wing position. But that's not the case anymore. You have to learn to tackle, you have to learn to distribute the ball. You're becoming a more complete player, right? So this is a shift in not just tactical perspectives. This is a shift in how you coach your youth. The entire club academy mentality has to kind of shift a little bit as well, because now you want to really have specific profile players taking up specific positions, right? So yeah, it's a huge shift, I would say, but it's the right one, right? I think it makes for slightly more exciting football as well. Because if everybody played a 4-4-2 and nobody did anything with it, right, games will be boring, right? So the Premier League especially is made for end-to-end, high intensity, exciting football, which is going to happen a lot more with these kinds of tweaks.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really well said. That gone are the days where, we saw the evolution over the last 20, 25 years that outside back is now part of an attacking buildup and is serving balls in and all that. And now it's not only, the the wherewithal to be in good position and recovery defensively, but in the buildup, right? And to become more of a technical player and not just one that gets up and down the pitch. And I think it's a more holistic development. I think it's one of the most demanding, not just physically, but the mental side of the game and the understanding of the game to kind of help quarterback, the match and kind of help in the build up play. I think it's really fascinating. One of the other trends that we're starting to see is kind of box midfields becoming standard, right? Over the years, we've seen all kinds of iterations of, when 4-4-2 was kind of this dominant thing, and then it moved into like that midfield diamond into different things, and then things flattened out, and then we saw the 4-2-3-1 and the trends of that. But now we're starting to see a bit more of these kind of 4-2-2s, these 3-2-2-3 type shapes, getting that extra layer in the buildup, and getting more, establishing superiority in the central parts of the field. And not just about getting wide and stretching the field, but it's also about how do we get vertically dominant. I think this has been an interesting reaction to Guardiola ball, right? And everyone, kind of tiki-taka type football, but we're starting to see a bit more, whether it's teams out of La Liga, Serie A, because of the quality of the buildup from whether it's a wing back, an outside back, a number six. We're starting to see a little bit more of these vertical balls over the top. There's even a lot of teams, RB Leipzig, RB Salzburg. Their big model was we're gonna gamble on those vertical diagonal balls, and if we can't get it, they're actually the rest of their team. Now, I don't love this style, but their team is organized to win the second ball. Mm-hmm. And that's part of their counterattack, right? We saw this at Leeds United a little bit with Jesse Marsch after he had been in, coaching in the kind of those Red Bull clubs, if you will. And it did not go well, right? You have to have a certain, personnel for that. You need to have a really big number 9. You need to have some very fast wingers and things like that, and people who can serve the ball. But we're starting to see a bit more of this verticality and a stretching. We're even seeing at times, even in some of these matches with Liverpool, where it's kind of a 3-2-5, right? When they're pressed up. Now, they're not just chucking balls over the top the whole time. They're varying it, but they are looking for that run. They are looking for that tucked in diagonal ball that's going to make a difference. What are your reactions to kind of this box midfield, or again, this tucking in that's happening in different ways, and the verticality coming back into the top leagues, I guess you would say, in Europe?
Yeah, it's again, it's a very tactically oriented approach that is just designed to protect the center of the field, right? And I think it goes back to the basics on how you teach kids to protect the middle at all costs, win every ball in the middle, right? And I think you're absolutely spot on with this. Really started off as a reaction to Guardiola ball, right? And he does not get enough credit for it, I feel. The ripple effects that Guardiola's style has caused throughout the ecosystem as well is really not given the right amount of credit, I feel. Because Guardiola's mentality was, you know what, you can pack in whatever you want in there. We will penetrate, right? We will do one touch play. We'll move into the right spaces. You can put 10 people behind the ball. We'll penetrate through the middle, right? We don't even need to go wide. And that just scared people, right? And just the opponents were like, how do we keep up with this? How do we how do we ensure that you know we're not defending against this sort of an attack, because it's virtually undefendable, right? And so the solution started to become, you know what, we need to really put a lot more effort on the high press and on the winning of the central ball centrally, right? Winning of the second ball centrally, actually. So I think that's where all of these really shifts have come from, because now there's so much more emphasis on winning that second ball, because winning that second ball really gives you the opportunity to counterattack. It gives you the opportunity to really go back and build up at your own pace as well, right? And I think that's just become very important, right? If you go back about, let's say 20 years ago, there's and just look at some of the the Dion Dublins and some of those other strikers. I think Alan Shearer scored so many goals this way as well, where striker number one goes into midfield, jumps for the ball and heads it onto striker number two, who's making a run, and striker number two scores, right? And that was a classic 4-4-2, where one striker goes into the middle and then the other makes a run, right? But that's not happening anymore, pretty much, because you are that midfield is so congested and everybody's fighting for that first ball and second ball, that it's very difficult to off the bat to just start building an attack, right? You really have to win that second ball to then determine, okay, am I now putting in a through ball for the attacker, or am I going back to build the way our team builds up normally, right? And you'll see a lot of teams, to the frustration of the fans, right? They'll win that second ball, and then the first thing they'll do is they'll pass it back to their defender, because they have been coached to build up in a very specific, controlled way, right? And all of this stems from that midfield being overpopulated, in order to win that second ball. So we're going to see a lot more of this. We're going to really see systems oriented towards that central midfield, whether it's the 3-2-2-3 or some other systems, right? And this is where the tucking in of the fullbacks as well, it comes in, because that centrality has become so critical to any team's success or failure. It ends up being, I would say, a £5 million swing for the English Premier League, right? Depending on where you finish up in the table, right? So if it's worth £5 million at least, then you got to put in a lot more effort into that central midfield.
Yeah, and I think there is this reality as well, that like so much emphasis, it shifted from everyone needs to be a winger to then everyone needs to now be a wing back, outside back. And now we're starting to see then the reemergence of like proper number nines too in the midst of this. But the reality, Isak, Sesko, Erling Haaland, right? But there's only usually one of those on a pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is interesting, I think, even, all the kids I coach at every age, guess where they want to play? They want to be a number 9. Well, there's usually one number 9. And in most systems, as young people go into further club soccer, to play in college, to play professionally, whatever that might look like, there's usually one, right? There's usually one number 9. And so I think even what I love about the interchanging reality of roles amongst, the number 10, a number 7, a number 11, as well as even in those midfield, 6s and 8s that kind of interchange or whatever, is that it's cross training for, if that might not be the position they start at, but they may end up there, right? They're going to end up on the, a left winger is going to end up on the right side or in that spot as a number 10. So it actually gives you extra development, as long as their direction, a defined play style, those kinds of things. And we're even seeing that at the highest levels of global football as well. And then the last one on this is, press resistant goalkeepers. Gone are the days where you can just have a shot stopper, right? The modern keeper has to facilitate a lot of playmaking. It's not just about, can they stop a penalty kick, or does their body positioning stop a shot? It's, can they scan? Can they pass? Can they break lines, right? Can they read the game? Can they see trends within the game of when to play it over the top, to when to play it short, when to play it central, those kinds of things. I think, honestly, watching Alisson again for Liverpool, wow. Like the way that guy in preseason has taken actually another step, kind of, you know, pretty established in his career. And, there's even rumblings again with him last season. Is he going to go somewhere? Is he going to leave? Watching his ability to play outside the box. Now, there's times where it's cost them before, right? But at the same time, seeing long ball, short ball, him reading the game, his tactical awareness is fascinating. So it'll be interesting to see, what goalkeepers kind of provide that advantage in the Premier League, in La Liga and Serie A and the Bundesliga, and how that becomes a distinct advantage. But I also think it starts modeling to younger players that, man, when we can play that way, it actually is a significant advantage. When you can include your goalkeeper, trust your goalkeeper to play, man, it changes, whether it's futsal, whether it's, a 7v7, a 9v9, or 11v11. It really does, change the dynamic of a match. Anything in particular with that you're looking for this year?
Yeah, I think this is a good time to plug our partners at Total Football Analysis, right? And if you like tactics and all of these topics, right, they're a great place to read about what's happening out there. So if you like listening, listen to us. If you like reading, go to Total Football Analysis. We'll put a discount code in the show notes and in the description here, so that you can enjoy that. But I think one thing I saw on Total Football Analysis is last season there were two statistics that really stood out for me. The first statistics is that when there was a goal kick, the first pass that was played was within the box, right? Within the larger box that we have. And that was done 67% of the time, right? And again, you go back 10, 20 years, the that first pass was outside the box. It was a long goal kick usually, right? So we've started that building up from the back culture a lot more. You see a lot of teams doing it now, that you have a back three, back four that pushes back right to the goalkeeper's line, and you build up from there, right? So that first pass is extremely short these days. Oftentimes it's a defender actually taking the goal kick and passing to the goalkeeper sometimes, right? So you definitely need goalkeepers today that are adaptive to that sort of a building from the back culture. The second statistic that really stood out is last season was the season for the most number of chipped goals over the goalkeeper from over 20 yards, right? And this is directly showing us that these goalkeepers now are part of the playmaking system. They are the sweeper keeper. So they're pushing up so much that when their team loses the ball, there's an open goal behind them, pretty much, right? So the emphasis on the sweeper keeper is tremendous. The pressure is there. And to your point, Brandon, you have to have the ability to read the game a lot more, right? You just need to have that sense of how deep lying should I be at this point, and how critical is the opponent's attack, right? How probable is it that my team will lose a ball at this point? All of these things are going through your head. It's not just what's my position to stop this shot, right? There's so much more going through goalkeepers' head these days. So I think in general, I'm looking at how in the next season this trend will evolve, and how many more teams will really adopt this, right? And how many more keepers will start pushing up further, as well. So it'll be interesting to see it. And one of the places I'm really keen on exploring it more is in Italy. It's very very tactically oriented there. So would they really unleash the goalkeeper as much as the English Premier League does, for example, right? So it'll be interesting to see how each of the leagues evolve from this perspective.
Mm. Yeah, even looking at Total Football Analysis online right now, they have the data from the 23-24 season, so a couple seasons ago. A player like Allison receives the ball 88 times per match, per 90 minutes, right? And his pass completion rate is about 80 to 82%. So
Wow.
that's a big deal, right? Like that's not like, hey, they might touch the ball just on goal kicks or whatever. This is, I mean, they are receiving and playing the ball a lot. Obviously that depends on play style and all those things, but when you can include a goalkeeper, can you imagine that in a match, your goalkeeper touching the ball that many times, right? And fascinating to see the stats on that, the data points on that, and how that impacts how you play, how you build up, your patience, your trust, all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's. I think that's almost once per minute that the goalkeeper is touching the ball, right?
Yeah, like it's overwhelming how often they're getting the ball played back to them, and the same with center backs, and where things are recycled. How often that you think of all these attacking players getting the ball, and then obviously there's a lot of build up, involvement from the goalkeepers and the center backs as well. Well, we want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Touchline Talk. If you've enjoyed this breakdown, share it with a fellow coach, fellow football fan. Subscribe to Soccerspective and this Touchline Talk show on your favorite platform, YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. And stay tuned for more transfer insights, tactical analysis as the European season unfolds. Until next time, thank you, and we'll see you again soon.